Welcome into another episode of the Odds and Audibles podcast. Another two-man show here. Matt Preem is in transit heading to Pac-12 Men's Basketball Media Day in Las Vegas. He'll be leaving behind the rainy weather here in Eugene. So Erik Skopil and Jared Mack are left to be here while he's in sunny Las Vegas. This seems to happen every time he's not on the show. He's somewhere where the weather is better. Can't blame him. But we are going to trudge through the cold, the rain today, to run through kind of the practice report, also some things that Dan had to say.
It's 62 and sunny right now. I mean, that's a
You're
good
right.
time.
You're right. The weather has passed, and my angle is no longer quite as valid. Earlier today, it would have been very, very
Big
valid
rain.
when we moved
Big rain.
inside. Yeah, the rain, the wind. We moved inside. It led to me sitting on a thing I shouldn't have sat on. Anyway, that's not a thing we have to talk about. A regrettable moment. Regardless, let's talk. Let's get back on task here, Jared. Let's start with injuries, which is where we usually start these shows. Some good news coming down the wire from Mr. Lanning on Monday on his weekly press conference. To conclude, he said both Brian Addison, Kyrie Jackson, two guys whose availability I wouldn't say was super up in the air, but we needed some clarity. Both are expected to play against Washington this weekend. Jackson had missed probably about the second half. I can't remember exactly when he left with that hip. Looked like a hip injury of some kind at Stanford. Missed most of that, at least most of the second half, if not all of it. And then Brian Addison, we did not identify pre-game. I don't know, Jared, did you end up seeing him on the sideline during the game or on rewatch? I don't think I did.
No, I don't think he was. I mean, he might have been there, but he wasn't on the sideline. It was the same with Justin Jacobs. Like neither of them were there, even though I think they were on the travel roster from what we were told.
From what we were told, they were supposed to be there. We never identified them. But good news, both Kyrie and Brian, it sounds like, are back at practice. We then were able to confirm that today, Tuesday morning, when we watched practice. Both took part in the full contact mod bracket drill, which is a good sign. We should also note Justin Jacobs, I guess he's been doing this for several weeks now, also took part in that full contact drill. That was good to see. So good news with those three. Obviously, going into this one in particular, having Kyrie and Brian available, pretty significant. Those are two of your better defensive backs. Kyrie, I think, is certainly your best corner, and you could probably argue your best defensive back. I think I would.
Yes.
And then Brian Addison. I mean, it's a tough one. There's some good players.
It's close. There's three above the rest, but go ahead.
And then I was just going to say, Brian Addison is somebody who, especially in games where the ball is going to be thrown around a lot, we have seen now for a couple of seasons his value on the back end there with that length and the range he can cover. So significant that kind of all hands on deck, as far as we know, from a secondary perspective, are available. There really aren't any injuries there at all. So that was all really positive.
Do you want me to give the negative news?
Yeah, maybe I'll be good cop. You can be bad cop.
Yeah, I can be bad cop. That's fine by me. Jerry Mixon was not at practice today. No, I'm kidding. Sorry to do that to you.
He actually wasn't.
He actually wasn't as practice. Yeah, but sorry to do that to you, listeners and or watchers. Brandon Dorlus was absent today on Tuesday, October 10th. One of the first times we hadn't seen him at practice. I don't remember a time where we haven't seen him at practice. Could be going back to spring maybe. But yeah, he was the most significant absence of the day. A couple other guys didn't make it to practice, like the aforementioned Jerry Mixon. We thought Tavita Pomey didn't make it out there, but he was in attendance today. And Justice Lowe and Lipe Moala were the other couple players who weren't in attendance. But Brandon Dorlus obviously is the biggest name. It's going to be an absolute necessary player to have, and if Oregon really wants to win against Washington, he's one of their best defensive linemen, if not their best defensive lineman. So that'll be interesting to see if he's at practice tomorrow. I am a betting man, and I would say that I think we will see Brandon Dorlus. There is a Twitter theory that he is taking photos in the uniforms that are going to be dropping tomorrow, and that's why he missed practice. The only problem with that is that when players have missed, or when players have done photo shoots before, and when it would theoretically be during practice time, they're there. So I think we can put that theory to bed, like Casey Rogers and Terrence Ferguson. Camden Lewis always misses Tuesday practice. He actually has a scheduling conflict going on with one of his graduate courses. So that makes sense. He was not here today either on a Tuesday, again, October 10th. Brandon Dorlus, to our knowledge, does not have a class schedule conflict because he would have been having this all
Right.
fall.
The last couple weeks.
And so, yeah, not all fall, last couple weeks, but we would have noticed it beforehand. So this again, Brandon Dorlus was absent. I'm not going to hedge anything here, but I kind of expected to see him tomorrow, and today was something. Maybe there was an actual scheduling conflict. Maybe it was the photo shoot. I don't know, but um, I I would be very surprised if Oregon had allowed Dorlus's image to be thrown about in the weekly recap or the cinematic recap from the
Yep.
University of Oregon, the official YouTube and video page. Like so often in that video, Dorlus was represented. So I'd be surprised if he was injured last week during practice and was still shown in that video. So we'll see tomorrow, but certainly big news today.
I had the exact same thought as Jared about the cinematic recap, and it was kind of comical that they did one during the bye week. I got why. You got kind of shows some of the behind the scenes what they're doing while they're not
Mhm.
playing. But as Jared said, Dorlus was prominently featured several times. I did look back through my notes, Jared. I don't know if this is valuable information. Dorlus did miss a practice according to my notes on August 16th. So there is that apparently. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we're just kind of at this point left to kind of wait and see what happens. We'll be back at practice on Wednesday. That'll give us a second time. And if he is absent again, that will be a question for Dan Lanning shortly after practice on Wednesday to try to get some sort of an idea of what is going on. Um, yeah, this is a big one. If he's not available somehow, and I think that would be a surprise. He was not injured in any of the games. He's played in all five, as it was established, he was in the video just a couple of days ago that they released,
Right.
or I guess that was yesterday.
Mhm.
But we will be back out there Wednesday. We'll report on Thursday's podcast what the latest is there and if there is more reason for concern. And of course, if you want more up to the date information, you can check out DuckTerritory.com. We will have a full practice report as we do every Tuesday and Wednesday up on the site with all of that information. Um, was there anything else from practice that we actually watched today that you wanted to touch on? I don't know if I've got really much of anything. I guess I'll pose the question: do you think Justin doing the same thing he's done previously now with a bye week behind him? Like, are you feeling like he's going to make a debut this weekend, or are we just left in this spot where we're waiting until we see him?
I mean, he did more today than he had done in the previous 2 practices we've seen him because we didn't see him at all during the bye week. So we're
Sure.
going back to Stanford week.
Yeah. Right.
He
Yep.
participate in Stanford week. He did participate in mod bracket, but I don't remember seeing him participate in the special teams drills, and he did that again today.
Good point.
So he could have against Stanford. I don't remember it. I feel like I would have seen it because obviously Justin Jacobs is a topic of conversation and something that I've been looking out for as the defensive guy of the trio of us three, how redundant. As the defensive guy in the trio,
Mhm.
I should be paying attention to that, and I feel like I would have seen it if it did happen.
Right.
But today he goes out, obviously the first rep of the mod bracket drill, which does mean a little bit. It's not like it's
Hmm.
nothing to be the first rep out there, because he was paired with I forgot who it was, but it
It
was
was
Kyrie Jackson I
Steve
got it right here, Steve
Stevens.
Stevens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, two counterparts who play a
Yep.
lot. And usually the offensive guys, that's a mix of first team dudes and maybe a second team guy. So um, I wouldn't put all my stock in it, but I'd put some into it. In terms of if he will play this weekend, I don't know.
Mm,
Yes, I think yes, especially after another week. If it was really critical time, like hypothetically 2021 University of Oregon linebacker crew that
yeah.
just got decimated with injuries, I think Justin would have played against Stanford, but they didn't need him. Just like
No.
they didn't need Kyrie Jackson for the rest of the game. They're like, hey, you kind of got dinged up. Fine. Jalil Florence, you were kind of dinged up last week. We don't need you. Bye. Um, this week, however, I'm hesitant to say he will play because, boy, this is a this is a tough game to come back from. I'll tell you what, especially as a defender, especially as a linebacker.
Yep.
Um, we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get reps, like play at all, like just to get him back there on. But to be like a starter or to get like 50 reps, I'd be very surprised about. But I would imagine he plays, but I've been wrong many times before.
And we're getting to the point of the year where whatever injury he had, you would think would be getting close to being fully healed. And the fact that he's taking full contact reps in practice now for at least a couple of weeks,
3 weeks, yeah.
encouraging, coming off a bye week. Sometimes you see that strategy where, as to Jared's point, if he was 85% of it healthy for Stanford, you say, let's just hold it off. Let's give him an extra week to fully heal up
Yeah.
and then throw him out there. So I'm leaning as well towards him playing, but we don't have any information. And I can almost guarantee you Dan will not want to answer a question on Wednesday about his status, because it seems like Dan's rule right now with injuries is if we have personally seen the person be injured or absent from a game, it may be kind of fair game to bring up. But if it's a person we haven't seen all season, like Justin, he doesn't seem overly interested in discussing it. So that's where we are with injuries. I don't think there's anything else from practice really at all to touch on.
No.
Again, we will update folks about Dorless later on this week. Let's dive a little into some Washington talk. Dan's comments on Washington's offense kind of matched what you would expect they would be, which is, this is a very unusual test. I think he called it a very unique test to face three receivers like this. I think he said something along the lines of, usually you go against a team and there's one guy, maybe two guys that they really want to force the ball to. But with Washington, they've got three really, really good receivers. What we were just talking about earlier this week. Also very high on Michael Penix. I think he said he's probably the most talented quarterback they've faced to date, which I will take the probably away and say he's the most talented they've faced. It was complementary as well with the way Penix is able to extend plays with his legs, but also with the way the offensive line protects him. Because I do think it stands out when you look at the numbers that Oregon and Washington are at the top of the Pac-12 standings in terms of sacks allowed, with only 3 so far through 5 games. And Washington's also by far the most prolific passing offense in the country. I think it's like almost 85, 90 yards more per game than number 2 from a total passing yards. Like, that's a unique setup there where you've got a team that throws the ball so often, but never really gives up sacks. So I think that kind of was something we talked about maybe a little bit on Monday. I don't remember if we did entirely, but it's something I think throughout this week we'll certainly be pointing to and wanting to talk about, because we saw against Colorado and a little bit against Stanford the pass rush come alive. And this is a game where there's going to be opportunity. Dan said it. They're going to throw the ball a lot, but can they get home? Can they make an impact? Obviously, having Brandon Dorless available in this game changes things too. But I think that to me is becoming one of the elements that needs to be talked about maybe a little bit more. We're going to spend a lot of time this week talking about the receivers and the quarterback, as they should, because those are undoubtedly NFL players and guys whose names are frankly going to be called day 1, day 2 for sure. I think the offensive line has done a great job in protecting Penix. Penix does a great job of protecting himself, sort of like Bo Nix. But that's a component, I think, to really kind of hone in on this week of, okay, can Oregon hold up in the secondary for 5 to 6 seconds if their pass rush can't get there? That's where it gets
Right.
tough. And the flip side is, I think Oregon could kind of, I don't want to say put this one away, but can kind of take control if they can get home the way they have been the last couple of weeks here. So I think that sneakily is to me almost the biggest or one of the bigger areas to kind of focus on.
Yeah, it's a testament to like football for as long as it's been a sport. Like, if you control the line of scrimmage, you can control the game, and that's what Oregon is built to do. That's what Mario Cristobal tried to do at Oregon when he got here. It's what Dan Lanning is trying to continue to do, just more so on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side of the ball. And you see the results in Oregon's defensive line already this year, having more sacks than they did all of last season. Dudes left and right who can get in there and get after the passer. They're rotating tremendous talent, in and out. Like, guys like Casey Rogers is out. You bring in Taki Taimani, you bring in Popo Amavai, Keon Ware-Hudson, and you got really good freshmen on the edge, Blake Purchase and Tatum Tuioti. So I think it's incredibly important that they get to the quarterback. I looked up the stats from last year. They had 10 quarterback pressures, which is a good amount, especially against a team that throws it as often as Washington does. But one quarterback hit, which that was a a talking point for Dan into the offseason and some of the
Mhm.
defensive linemen that they need to do a better job of wrapping up once they get a quarterback into these situations. They've done a better job. They're just a better defensive line at tackling a quarterback, which sometimes you think of as, pretty darn easy, but with Penix and a guy like Shador Sanders at points, like they're slippery. They can get out of it. You even saw it with Tyler Shuck that he was able to get out of a sack or two. So I think, excuse me, with how often they throw the ball, like Dan said, there will be plenty of opportunities to get into the back or the back end there with Penix and try to get some pressures. And I think Oregon will do it. It just depends if their secondary can hold up. Because any secondary that has to hold for 5 to 8 seconds is not going to do well.
No.
And it doesn't matter if you're in the NFL, doesn't matter if you're in college. Like that's too long of a time. And if you can get to the quarterback in 3-4 Mississippi, that's going to make Penix's job a lot tougher. I I'm interested to see what Washington's defense will look like against Oregon because there's not a lot of great stats about Washington's defense. It's not like they've been, terrible. It's not like they're USC. It's just that there's how if you're a listener who knows baseball savant, like the red is really good and the blue color for the stats is really bad. It's not like Washington has a lot of red or a lot of blue. There's just a lot of, purple, something right in the middle. It's not incredible, but they have Braylon Trice, they have ZTF. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. They have some guys who did a lot of good things in the last year or two, but haven't really come out yet this year and really showed what they're capable of. And maybe that's more of a testament to the improvement in offensive lines in the Pac 12. Maybe it's a testament to figuring out schemes to go against these guys to try to neutralize them, like teams try to do with like Kayvon Thibodeau's last season in Oregon, like go at him or go against him or try to bring 2 or 3 guys and chip them and stuff like that. Maybe that's just a scheme thing, but Oregon's starting tackles, Josh Conley Jr. and Johnny Cornelius, have been tested, but nothing crazy against Washington. Braylon Trice and ZTF, those guys are going to be the best competition that they faced all season long. So I'm interested to see about that. I'm going to write something today on that on DuckTerritory.com. I mean, there's a lot of aspects, but I'm trying to think of ones that aren't just like, can Oregon stop the passing offense of Washington? Because that's written in bold. That's bright lights flashing at everybody. Like, duh, that is the obvious one. And then the other obvious one is just, can Washington's pass defense stop Oregon's pass off? Like, these are the obvious things. So going a little bit beneath the curtain or underneath or behind the curtain and trying to figure out other aspects of this game that are must watch. I think the Oregon's relatively inexperienced with quotes right there against Washington's kind of more established defensive line presence, I think is one of my favorite ones to look at.
It's a good one. It is, and I think in part because Oregon has done such a great job since Bo Nix has gotten here at protecting him,
Yeah.
right? Last year,
Mhm.
this year, and then you go back and you look at Auburn when things weren't quite as good, and he was getting hit all the time, and the pressure was much more frequent. And then that's A, probably not the best offensive line play at Auburn, but B, SEC defenses where you just have a lot of NFL talent. You have a lot of Sunday players up front, and I think that was a big part of his struggles there, along with I'm sure some other stuff that doesn't have anything to do with that. But when you go and watch like the Bo Nix highlight package at Auburn, a lot of the plays are him scrambling for his life. I remember there's several against LSU, I think in 21, him scrambling for his life, running around, throwing the ball downfield. I think a couple of them work, but those are much lower percentage plays than when Bo is able to sit in the pocket comfortably. And so I'm in agreement with that,
Right.
Jared, because that hasn't been a problem really at all for him at Oregon. I think he's been sacked 8 times in like what is it now? Almost 20 games. Like
18 games. Yeah.
that's like
13 plus 5.
I'm trying to remember. Was last year? Did Oregon finish with 8 sacks allowed, or was it 5? I don't remember. Either way, it's not a very large number.
No.
So that's not been a problem. If that becomes a problem, that could be something to monitor. So I think that's worth bringing up. Another thing that's maybe not as much X's and O's to bring up, but just a little bit of kind of interesting talk today with the players because we did have Josh Connerly and Taki Taimani. Um, just kind of some of the history with a couple of these guys with Washington. Like Taki was talking today. Yeah, for those who are unfamiliar, he played his first 3 years at Washington.
Yeah.
he knows a lot of these guys. Like, he says he's still friends with some of these players at Washington. Like, so there is a little bit of history. He's going back and playing in the stadium that he played in a ton to start his career, and what is that going to be like for him? He's been playing, by the way. I don't know if we've talked enough on the pod, but Taki's been. I think he's like
He's been great.
the top graded PFF interior defensive lineman in the Pac-12 right now. Like, and again, they're
Mhm.
rotating so much that it's like, I think just around 100 snaps in 5 games. So not a huge sample size, but enough where you go, he's been really productive when he's been out there. Um, so you kind of wonder, and I'm not saying Taki's going to go in there and be lost and all that, but that's just an added personal element here of he's got that component. And as he
Right.
was asked about today, like, he heard about it quite a bit when he left Washington for Oregon, as you would expect. If a player left Oregon for Washington, the same thing would be the case. Duck fans, Husky
Well,
fans don't love it when their players play for the rival. I know. Well, you're going to give Oregon fans a little bit more credit, or sorry, fans more credit.
I mean, how much is our Oregon fans talking about Darren Barkins?
I forgot Terry Perkins was on the team.
Exactly. So I'm not
Yeah,
gonna like I'm not sitting here, I'm not gonna like start trashing Washington fans or anything like that. But I do think it's just egregious. It's like Taki was a pretty productive player at Washington. He wasn't
good player.
anything special, but it's not like they're losing. I don't know. It's not like
Braylon Trice or
gosh,
something.
dude.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
why
not
not?
like you're losing Trice or Adunze to Oregon. Like again, I think Taki's a very good player and he's done his part this year in his final year of college of eligibility. But just some of the things written, like specifically, we'll go off on a little tangent. That Sports Illustrated thing written about Taki, where it's just like completely uninformed and just awful, just horrendous journalism. Just I can't believe that that guy is even allowed a press pass going into this game, and I hope he's not, because the hate, the vitriol there, I just don't understand. Again, it's like, do Oregon fans spend their time talking about Darren Barkins? And I know that they're two different players because Taki actually plays for Oregon and Darren doesn't, and Darren didn't play at Oregon, but
Right, right.
still, it's like I don't get it. But sorry, had to go off my tangent. Continue,
It's
Erik.
it's a good tangent, and it kind of trickles right into the next one I was going to bring up when I think there was even more vitriol, which was for Josh Connerly Jr., a Seattle native who was heavily recruited by both Oregon and Washington, the number one offensive lineman in the country a couple cycles ago. Spurns the local school, goes to Oregon, and I saw a lot more on the other side of that one than Taki in terms of what was
Yeah.
being written on social media, and it got super ugly, and it got super ugly for a teenager. So in the back of these guys' minds that that isn't something you totally forget. It doesn't necessarily mean it's personal with the Washington players, but it certainly with the fan bases and the way they've kind of carried themselves throughout this. You got to feel for it. I don't think Josh really brought it up too like really harped on it too much. He was asked about it, but yeah, those words probably didn't feel very good to hear, especially from people from your own community that you grew up in. But Connerly also brought up the fact that like Husky Stadium is a stadium he went to countless games at growing up, being that he grew up in Seattle. And that's going to be a component of it too. I did also ask about, Oregon's now played one game on the road since Texas Tech, but let's be honest, it was Stanford. There was no crowd noise there. So the false start penalties that I think it was 3 false start penalties that Josh had at Texas Tech. Is that right? It was
He had at
Oregon had
least two. I remember
the
at least two.
the team had 5, I believe, and I thought Josh had 3. So that was a problem there. And I did ask him if he feels more comfortable and confident in his ability there pre-snap, especially going into another hostile environment. And I think he said something about being at the eye of the storm because that's the
Hmm.
calmest place you can be, even with all the stuff around you. So he's gotten good coaching from a leak and all of those in the room there. But you just wonder what it'll look like on Saturday, where again, back in a familiar environment, maybe seeing some faces he's seen before in the crowd. Maybe he's going to be targeted in particular by fans. I don't know if they really do that in football like they would in basketball. Like if Josh Connerly was playing on the Oregon men's basketball team and they were going up to Seattle, they would make a big deal about it. I'm not sure they'll do the same thing here, but you just kind of that's important. Your left tackle being focused, dialed in, especially when he's had some
Right.
pre-snap issues in the past, like him being able to hold his own facing, we talked about earlier, Braylon Trice, CTF, whoever's in front of him, but also being able to kind of block out the noise and be focused and play at his best. I think it's imperative you get that because as we were kind of talking about earlier, Nix needs to be protected in this one. And if he's not, a lot
Hmm.
of that could fall on the left tackle based upon how defenses often attack opposing pass offenses.
I mean, yeah, if Trice and ZTF start getting to Bo Nix, it's going to be off of one of the two tackles. Those guys are traditionally like on the outside of the line. Sometimes
Yeah,
they're standing up, but traditionally they're going right over the tackle. Maybe sometimes they're stunting, but traditionally they're going outside the tackle to try to get this. And I mean, hmm, I think there's going to be some hate and vitriol towards Josh Connerly Jr. I mean, that's
100%.
a kid who again, turned down going to his hometown team to come to Oregon, and Oregon is very appreciative of that because he's their starting left tackle, and he's going to be a good player, and he's already great as a sophomore, and I'm excited to see what he can be as a junior, and I don't know, he could have some first round buzz towards the end of his career. I'm sure of it,
Sure.
um, but it's not going to be fun. Um, if you're a Washington fan, to not think, wow, I wonder what it could be like if he were the starting left tackle. And if you're Washington, you don't want to lose a kid that's in your backyard, especially a kid of his caliber. It's the same with JT Tuamale at Ohio State. Same thing with Emeka Egbuka at Ohio State. Like those are some really good kids, and if Ohio State were to play at Washington, it would be the same kind of crowd reaction, I think. But it hurts even more that the kid went to Oregon. So Connolly doesn't deserve it. Again, he made the point of like, look, like I made the best decision to me, and then Taki Taimani later, and not the same kind of context, but making the decision to go to Oregon as a transfer rather than as a recruit was like, I'm the guy who gets to play on the field.
Yeah.
I get to make these decisions. Like fans don't. Like they're not on the field. They're not in my shoes. Like you can be mad at me all you want, but um, I get to make these decisions and make the plays. So I think that's a good perspective to have. I think most people should have that perspective because yeah, they're not the players, and it's the same with like coaches leaving for a better salary. It's like, well, which one of you wouldn't want to have generational wealth or double or triple your salary like in a blink of an eye? So I think that'll be a fun little side feature, is because there's a couple kids from Washington on Oregon's team, or and Taki specifically played at Washington. Guys like Jane Lamar, another kid from Washington who we won't get to talk to because he's a true freshman, but uh, there's a decent chance you see some reps out of him
Yeah.
just because of the running back rotation. Just something to think about, and I think that'll be a fun small storyline to the game. I should we uh, should we get into some of Washington's injuries after we got into some of Oregon's injuries, just as a quick little
Yeah.
uh, finality to this episode?
The only other thing I was going to say was I did ask
Go for it.
Dan. It's really quick, and then I'll let you kind of run through some of that. And I know for the most part, it seems to be good news for Washington, which is good news for the fans because it seems like both teams are closing in on pretty close to full strength. But I did
Mhm.
ask Dan. I think Bo was kind of asked a little bit about it too, just of how last year's loss. Like, are you using that as motivation? Are you going to lean into that? And they both kind of said like, that was last year. Obviously, it's a game that we think a lot about, and it's a game that we were obviously very disappointed to lose. But it's a new year, and Dan's point was kind of like these guys, they don't really need that kind of external motivation. This is a team that is playing for, it's a playing for to reach a certain standard every week. It's a team that is motivated by other goals other than just beating a rival. Obviously, they want to win this game badly because it keeps a lot of things open for them. But thought that was kind of interesting, especially with the way we've seen Dan behind the scenes talk about certain things. If you look back at the Colorado week, and who knows, maybe they'll when they release the cinematic recap next week, Dan will, lean into it a little bit more. Maybe he will bring up about they took this from you last year. Don't let them take it from you again.
Right.
I don't know, but thought it was interesting perspective that maybe I don't want to say not expecting to hear, but was just a little bit unique and maybe different than what I anticipated.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm interested to see if they would theoretically, if Oregon were to lose, would they release a cinematic recap? My bet is no,
I was wondering the
but
same thing. Well, they could find a way to. Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. That'd be interesting. I was gonna say they could find a way to turn that into a Dan talking about learning experiences afterwards, blah blah blah. But do they really want to show the guys after a loss like that? I don't know. We'll see.
yeah,
It's a good
my
point.
my guess is the cameras will be shut off for that one. Um,
Probably.
but going back to Washington injuries, Jalen McMillan and Roma Dunze, their top receivers, will be healthy, will be playing. I think Adunze got hurt towards the end of the Arizona game. I'm not sure how big it was, but Jalen McMillan didn't play in the Arizona game. Like, he had an actual injury. Um, he Kalen DeBoer had his press conference yesterday on Monday and talked about it and said that he was a couple days away from playing at Arizona. So given the bye week,
Yeah.
he'll be just as fine to go. Safety Asa Turner is coming back, and left guard Julius Buelow, Buelow, Buelo, I think, are
Buelo, maybe.
yep, Buelo, something are both expected to return. Turner is a safety, Buelo is a left guard. So Washington's offensive line has been hit kind of hard by injuries this year. They've had one or two guys go down with a season-ending injury. So, and they've done fine. Like we've
Yeah.
I don't even know if we've mentioned, but Washington, or we have on yesterday's podcast, but today Washington's offensive line is quite good. They do a good job of protecting Michael Penix this year. So not that they necessarily immediately need Buelo back, but it certainly will help them in terms of their depth and being able to potentially rotate guys out if necessary. And then Turner, again, against Oregon, it's similar to how the Ducks feel about this. Like, getting secondary guys back against a pass-friendly offense is always going to be a positive. I think Turner was a guy who got plenty of reps before his injury, so
He
he was a 4-star recruit back in the day as
he
well.
he led Washington in tackles last year against Oregon. I know that just from looking at last year's box score. So
Mhm.
he's been involved.
I'm trying to see if this little article tells me
It,
very quickly, but it doesn't look like it.
did he give an update on Thule? And this name is really hard to pronounce. Letisagonia, maybe. I don't know if I pronounced it. It's one of their starting interior linemen who's missed a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's uncertain. So
That's ominous.
yeah, I don't really love that, but if you're a Washington fan, you don't really love that. Oregon fans, I'm sure, are delighted. But reading between the tea leaves, not great. You don't like the uncertainty. You'd much rather have like a Dan Lanning thing where it's like, are you expecting him to play? Yes or no, or whatever Dan says. The we're uncertain doesn't necessarily bode well,
No.
but it is a big game. So there's a chance that guys who are 85% are not going to get a week off to rest, because I think I read something where basically whatever team wins this game has like an 80% chance of winning the Pac-12 championship, or 75% chance of winning the Pac-12 championship.
Makes sense.
And it flows both ways. So Washington wins, it goes up to like 75%. If Oregon wins, it goes up to 75, and they both lose, it's like 34, 36% of odds of winning the Pac-12 championship. So I would imagine that people who are close to being able to play will be playing today. Sorry, not today. Saturday.
Last question for you, and I'm curious on your thoughts. It's kind of weird because Josh Pate, we recorded the interview earlier today. That podcast will actually go up Wednesday, tomorrow, so you can listen to that. It's a really good interview Jared and I did with him. He said something that kind of stuck out to me where because Oregon hasn't lost yet, he said a loss this weekend doesn't end your season. I think he especially said if it was like a 4-point, it was a close game.
Yeah.
Are we in must-win territory right now for Oregon? Like, is this a must-win, or if they? I mean, and again, I'm not trying to because there are going to be people listening who say, "Here's Erik trying to like throw out he thinks they're going to lose." I'm not saying that at all. I'm just wondering if, like, from your perspective, like if Oregon loses 48-45 on Saturday and it's an awesome game and it comes down to a last-second field goal or something like that, like, does that ruin Oregon's season? Does that end the momentum that they have, or do you still look up and say, "Hey, like, there's not another team on the schedule that they for sure are going to lose to, and they could be a one-loss team playing Washington again in Las Vegas in early December."
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a must win or a can't lose,
Mm-hmm.
It's tough because, if they lose and it's a 3-point game like we're laying out, or like Pate said, like a close one score, maybe a game-winning field goal type game, it's kind of like how it was last year.
It is.
Like, if Oregon wins against Oregon State, like, they're in a New Year's Six bowl.
True.
They just lost to Oregon State. And if
Yeah.
Oregon were to win, if Oregon were to lose against Washington, honestly, either of these teams, if they were to win, or if either of these teams were to lose, there's still a incredibly tough conference schedule for both of these teams immediately after this game. They both have to play Washington State, who I know lost to UCLA, but still a top 25 team. I think they both have to play Utah, and I think they both have to play Oregon State.
I
I'm
think
not
so.
sure about the Utah thing for Washington, but
I'm gonna pull up Washington's schedule.
they do both have to play USC. So that's another thing. Like there are opportunities down the line to enhance your strength of schedule, your status. Like if you were to finish the regular season 11-1, there's a really good chance that whatever team loses this game is just going to play the other team in the Pac-12 championship game. And then I think the winner of that would honestly be surefire into the college football playoff because, and people will get to listen to this tomorrow on Wednesday. But Josh Pate brought up the thing where it's like we gave for years now, last decade or so, we've given the SEC so much credit as to the depth and pure talent that they've had in their conference during any given year, where we will see a Georgia versus Alabama in the SEC championship game and then potentially in the national championship game. The Pac-12 is a hell of a conference this year. You know, there's at one point there were what, like 8 teams
Yeah.
in the top 25, which again is far too many. There's not that many good teams, but there's a solid 6 that are really good and that could be in and out of the top 25 every single week. And if you're to go 11-1 during the conference play or finish with an 11-run record after the year, that's a hell of a year. You should be in Pac-12 or you should be in college football playoff consideration. But I think whoever does lose this game certainly has a chance to get right back in it. We've seen plenty of one-loss teams go to the college football playoffs. And it also depends on your perspective of what you expect from this Oregon team. If you think it's a college football playoff team, yeah, you're going to be disappointed if they lose. If you're just hoping for a New Year's Six game, you're okay with a loss because, again, they have a bunch of opportunities to get to that New Year's Six level or maybe even that college football playoff level down the road. You still got USC at home, like big matchups that you can still win and prove that was a really good team that we lost to, but hey, so are we.
Margin of error goes away is what it is, I think.
Correct,
For either team. You can't lose again
Mhm.
to try to make a college football playoff. You can still lose again and possibly make the conference championship game, I think, based upon how competitive this league is. Washington does play Utah. They do play Oregon State. They finish with USC, Utah, Oregon State, and Washington State, which is a
That's
tough way to conclude a season.
Yeah,
Not going to be easy.
At least Oregon has ASU in there, but that
And
game
Cal.
is going to give and Cal, but like the finishing stretch, that ASU game is going to give some heart palpitations to the Oregon crowd. Always does in Arizona in the desert in November.
I think that's going to do it for us, unless you had something else there, Jared.
I got something very specific, but it was just kind of not important to this podcast, so we can talk about it at a later date.
Let's save that for Thursday when Matt will be back. We will do our full prediction podcast, run through some more things. Jared will bring up whatever talking point he has left and carry it over to Thursday. Again, check out Wednesday's show. I think fans are going to be excited. We had Josh Pate for about 30 minutes. It was a good interview. Talked about a lot of things. He's very high on this Oregon team. He's, I think, expecting, I don't say an Oregon win necessarily, but the way he was talking, he thinks Oregon is going to play at a high level here. And he's pretty high on the defense, which I think is something fans will be excited to listen to on Wednesday. But for this podcast, thanks for listening. Talk to you later, folks.